She wasn't supposed to be there, just a janitor, filling in for a friend. But when Lena walked into the wrong office, and her sketchbook fell open on the marble floor, time stopped. A man's voice snapped through the silence. "Who gave you this drawing?" She turned, startled. "No one. I drew it. From a dream." He stepped closer, pale. "This isn't just a drawing," he whispered. "This is my mother." He built an empire with logic, power, and steel walls. She walked into his world by accident, a sketchbook in hand, and eyes full of dreams. But when he opened that book, it wasn't art. It was his past, drawn by a stranger, and nothing in his life made sense anymore. The rain hadn't let up since dawn. Cold, relentless sheets poured from the sky, turning sidewalks into rivers and umbrellas into useless props. Lena Morgan stood shivering beneath the overhang of Whitmore Industries, a skyscraper of steel and glass that seemed to pierce the storm itself. Her umbrella had snapped inside out 3 blocks ago, and her tote bag, stuffed with spare clothes and her sketchbook, sagged with moisture. She wasn't even supposed to be here. Covering for her friend Rosa, who'd called in sick last minute, Lena had thrown on the Navy janitor's uniform and rushed out the door. All she knew was floor 12, East Wing, room 1201. Clean, mop, and stay invisible. But no one told her room 1201 was his office. The door had been slightly ajar. No nameplate, no lights. She figured it was just another executive suite. Quiet, modern, sterile. She'd barely started wiping the rainwater near the marble desk when a gust of wind from the cracked window scattered a stack of papers into the air. Lena dropped her mop and scrambled to catch the fluttering pages, unaware her sketchbook had slipped from her tote and landed open on the floor. She didn't hear the footsteps, didn't notice the shadow standing behind her, until a low, commanding voice broke the silence. "What are you doing in my office?" Lena froze. Heart racing, she turned around and came face to face with a man she recognized from news articles and magazine covers. Tall, composed, sharp-eyed, Ethan Whitmore, the CEO himself, and he was staring, not at her, but at the open page of her sketchbook, the drawing that wasn't supposed to be seen by anyone, certainly not by him. Ethan Whitmore stood in stunned silence, his expensive suit still damp from the rain outside, droplets clinging to his cuffs and collar. He had stormed into his office, ready to demand why someone was trespassing in his private space, only to be met with something far more disarming than a stranger. A sketch. Lena stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat as Ethan's eyes bore into the drawing lying at his feet. She hadn't meant for anyone to see it, let alone the man whose name was etched in gold on the building's highest floor. It was a simple crayon drawing, a small child in an orange coat hugging a woman beneath a black umbrella. They stood in a field of falling rain. But it wasn't just the sweetness of it that shook Ethan. It was the tiny detail that no stranger could have known. The woman's face had a soft mark, an irregular splash near the cheek, a birthmark, his mother's. His throat tightened. "Where did you get this?" His voice came out lower than he intended, a mix of disbelief and something deeper, something almost afraid. Lena blinked, nervous but honest. "I drew it," she whispered. "From a dream. It's been in my head for years." He crouched down slowly, picking up the paper as though it were made of glass. The edges were damp from the rain seeping through her tote. But the image, his memory, was unmistakably real. He hadn't seen that umbrella in decades, not since that day in the garden when he was 5. His mother had bent down, kissed his forehead, and wrapped the umbrella around them both. It had felt like safety, and no one else was there, except him. Except her? Lena reached out to retrieve the sketchbook, her cheeks flushed. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I'll leave." But Ethan didn't stop her. He didn't call security. He just stood there, watching her walk out, the sketch still trembling in his hand. And for the first time in years, the man who built an empire felt completely unsteady. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. He had sat alone in his glass-walled penthouse. Lights off, city below flickering like restless stars. The drawing lay on his desk beside untouched bourbon and scattered documents he couldn't focus on. That umbrella, that tiny orange coat, that birthmark. He hadn't seen or spoken of those memories in decades, not since he buried them under ambition, logic, in a fortress of silence. But somehow a stranger, a janitor, had drawn his past with impossible accuracy, and it haunted him. Days passed and he told himself it was a one-off, a coincidence, a fluke. People draw all sorts of things, but then she returned. Only this time, she left something behind, her sketchbook. Found hours later by a night guard, the book ended up on Ethan's desk by accident. He had intended to send it to HR, to have it returned without another word. But curiosity, a gnawing, unfamiliar urge, pulled him toward it. He opened the first page, then the next, and then another. And the deeper he went, the more his hands began to tremble. Each page was more intimate than the last. Drawings of a young boy with sad eyes, a woman with kind features and that unmistakable mark on her cheek, a garden bench, a hand reaching out, a broken clock. Ethan stopped cold at one page, a crayon sketch of a crumpled family photograph, one he thought had been lost in a fire when he was 7. How could she know? He leaned back, breath shallow. This wasn't just memory. This was his memory, refracted through someone else's hand, someone who shouldn't know any of it. He closed the book slowly, his mind spinning. Either Lena was part of some elaborate, cruel scheme, or something stranger, something unexplainable was happening. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Whitmore realized logic might not give him the answers he needed. Lena arrived early the next morning, still unsure whether she'd be allowed back into the building. She kept her head down, hoping to blend into the noise of footsteps and espresso machines. The corporate buzz she never quite fit into. But when she opened the supply cart tucked near the janitor's closet, her breath caught in her throat. There it was, her sketchbook. Right on top, clean, dry, untouched, except for one thing. A sticky note, pale yellow, stuck gently to the cover. The handwriting was neat, controlled. Why do your dreams look like my memories? Lena stood motionless for several seconds, reading the words over and over. It wasn't a threat, not an accusation. It was a question, one layered with something raw and vulnerable. Later that afternoon, a call came through her department's radio. She was being requested. By name. Ethan Whitmore's office, the voice said. He wants to see you. Heart pounding, Lena rode the elevator in silence. This time the door wasn't ajar. It opened slowly, with a soft click, and there he was, standing by the window, backlit by gray clouds and skyline. Come in, he said, softer than she expected. She stepped forward, unsure of what to say, but he didn't speak right away. Instead, he crossed to his desk and pulled out an old photo from a leather folder. He held it out to her. The woman in the picture, gentle, tired eyes, hair pulled back, and that small, distinctive mark on her cheek. Lena's hand flew to her mouth. That's her, she whispered. The woman I've drawn for years. Ethan's gaze was unreadable. That's my mother, he said. The room fell into silence, but not the kind that pressed down with discomfort. This was different, weightless, reverent, like a secret being shared, not explained. Lena slowly sat across from him, the sketchbook clutched to her chest. Neither of them spoke for a long moment, but in that quiet, something passed between them, something older than language and far more powerful. Understanding. They always whispered when they thought she wasn't listening. Lena walked through the sleek hallways with her card and gloves like always, head down, steps light. But something had shifted, the way conversations fell into silence as she entered. The side glances, the manufactured smiles. Then came the whispers, at first vague, then sharper. That's her, right? The janitor? Why would the CEO call her in personally? She must be playing some angle. Probably told him a sob story, poor, lonely girl act. She's not even that pretty. Lena tried to tune it out, pretend like she didn't hear. But words, even whispered, had weight, and these cut deeper than she expected. The moments she shared with Ethan had been quiet, real. But to others, they were unexplainable. And when people can't explain something, they turn it into gossip. She found herself cleaning faster, taking side stairs instead of the main elevator, avoiding break rooms entirely. Her sketches lost their color. Her lines trembled more than usual. She sat alone one evening in the janitor's supply closet, the one place she felt invisible in the right way. A sketchbook open on her knees, a drawing half finished, two hands reaching, almost touching, but not quite. Her eyes burned. She didn't belong here. Not in a place with designer suits and glass boardrooms. Not in his world. That night she opened her work email, heart heavy. No dramatic explanation. Just a few lines. Subject: resignation. Body: thank you for the opportunity. I will not be returning. She placed her badge gently on the front desk before the sun rose. One last look at the building that had given her a strange kind of hope. And then she stepped into the morning rain, just like she had when it all began. But this time, she wasn't carrying a sketchbook. Only silence. Ethan felt it immediately. No quiet footsteps in the hallway. No whisper of humming outside his door. No faint scent of citrus from freshly mopped floors. Lena was gone. By mid-morning, he was pacing. He called facilities, then HR. She submitted her resignation early this morning, the woman on the line said. Effective immediately. He paused. Did she give a reason? No, sir. Just asked to have her final check mailed. He stared at the phone, then at the corner of his desk, where her drawings still rested. The child, the umbrella, the woman with the birthmark. He picked it up and stood there in silence. Later that afternoon, the quarterly all-hands meeting was in full swing. Suits filled the conference hall. Slides clicked on. Polite applause rose and fell like waves. No one expected the CEO to appear. But when Ethan walked through the side door, everything stopped. He didn't head for the boardroom table. He walked straight to the stage, eyes focused, the drawing folded neatly in his hand. I know I'm not on the agenda, he began, his voice calm but carrying. But I need to address something personal. A ripple moved through the room. There's been talk, he continued, about a woman named Lena Morgan. He scanned the crowd. No one moved. Some of you said she didn't belong here, that she must have used something, or someone, to get close to me. That because she cleaned floors instead of managing accounts, she was somehow less. He unfolded the sketch, holding it up for all to see. This is what she left behind. A memory from my childhood I thought I'd buried. A moment no one else ever knew. Until her. He paused, the room breathless. She didn't ruin my morning. His voice cracked. She saved my soul. Then he stepped back from the microphone. No further explanation, no defense. He had spoken his truth. Now all that remained was whether he'd lost her for good. The sea wind was softer here. In the small coastal town of Ashmere, far from glass towers and boardroom agendas, Lena found temporary peace. She spent her mornings stacking books in a quiet local shop and her evenings sketching by the window of her aunt's cottage. There were no whispers here, no stares, just the gentle rustle of paper, the scent of old stories, and the sound of waves. She hadn't looked back, not once, until he arrived. One rainy afternoon, the bell above the bookstore door jingled. Lena turned from the counter, and her breath caught. Ethan stood there, out of place in a suit that looked too sharp for the faded wooden floors beneath him. But his eyes weren't cold this time. They were searching, gentle. I'm not here to apologize, he said, stepping forward, voice low but certain. I'm here to ask. She didn't speak, only watched him as he reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. I want to build something, he continued, placing the folder on the counter. With you. Inside were sketches, photos, notes, a proposal, an art initiative, a gallery for unheard voices, children in hospitals, survivors of trauma, caretakers and dreamers, a space where people who had never been seen could express the unspeakable. It's called Dream Traces, he said quietly, a place for people like you, who feel too much, who see too deeply. Lena's fingers hovered over the pages, tracing outlines, words, faces. Her throat tightened. Why me? She whispered. Ethan met her eyes. Because you see people. Because your drawings don't just show what's real. They show what matters. She didn't nod, didn't smile. She simply closed the folder, placed her hand over it, and said, "Okay." That one word was enough. The rebuild wouldn't happen overnight, but it had begun, with art, with trust, and with two people finally stepping out of silence, together. They named it Dream Traces, not a gallery, not a museum, but a sanctuary, a space where broken hearts could speak through color, where grief found form in charcoal strokes, and hope flickered between brush lines like morning light through cracked blinds. Lena breathed life into every corner. She didn't curate based on perfection. She curated based on truth, on vulnerability, on the stories people were too afraid to tell aloud. Survivors, orphans, wounded children, caretakers, all were welcome. Not because they were victims, but because they still carried light. There were crayon drawings from pediatric cancer wards, black and white portraits from women's shelters, sculptures made from shattered glass by veterans who had forgotten how to feel. But in the heart of the exhibit stood a single canvas that made the entire city stop. Lena's, a massive painting hung with quiet reverence, stretching nearly floor to ceiling. A small child stood beneath a storm, arms wrapped tightly around a woman, her frame weary yet protective. Rain poured down in silver lines, not drowning them, but shielding them. And behind them, instead of a city skyline or thunderclouds, there was a mirror, but not a literal one. It reflected stars, as if the love between the child and the mother had cracked the universe open, and from inside, spilled light. Guests didn't ask for captions. They didn't need explanations. Some stared in silence for minutes. Some cried without shame. Others whispered names under their breath, of people they had lost, of love they had forgotten. Because that painting wasn't just a moment on canvas. It was a memory, a longing, a truth people didn't know they still carried. And for many, it was the first time they felt seen. Dream Traces didn't make headlines because it shocked the world. It made headlines because it healed it, one silent gaze at a time. The beach was quiet that evening. Wind danced across the dunes, carrying the scent of salt and the hush of waves that broke gently along the shoreline. Seagulls drifted above like thoughts without words, and beneath a sky brushed in shades of lavender and fading gold. Ethan and Lena walked barefoot, side by side, without needing to fill the space between them. They had come here many times in recent weeks, but tonight felt different. Neither spoke of love in grand declarations. There were no candlelit dinners, no orchestrated surprises. But in the soft rhythm of their silences, in the way he always waited for her to finish her tea before speaking, or how she'd instinctively bring him pencils when he stayed late at the gallery, love grew quietly, like ivy climbing stone, steady and patient. Near a weathered driftwood log, Ethan stopped. Lena paused too, eyes lifting to meet his. His hand dipped into the pocket of his wool coat, and when it emerged, it held a small velvet box, simple, unadorned, but meaningful in its own right. She didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She just watched him, heart still, breath held in gentle suspense. He opened it. Inside lay a slender, silver bracelet, smooth and cool like moonlight. Etched into its surface was a flowing wave pattern, delicate and unbroken. And at the center of it, one single letter, L. He didn't kneel. He didn't ask a question. Instead, he held the bracelet in both hands and stepped closer. "This isn't a proposal," he said, voice quieter than the tide. "It's a promise." Lena's eyes shimmered, but she didn't speak. "A promise," he continued, "that you'll never be unseen again." His hands found her wrist. She extended it gently, and he fastened the bracelet with care, as if afraid he might break something sacred. For a long moment, they simply stood there, her fingers brushing the metal, his gaze steady on hers. She finally spoke, her voice barely more than a breath. "You see me, Ethan." He nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting just slightly. "I always did. I just didn't understand what I was seeing until you showed me." They sat together on the driftwood log, shoulders touching, eyes on the horizon where sky met sea. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder, not because she needed support, but because it felt like home. There were no titles between them, no expectations, just trust earned slowly. In the weeks that followed, love did not arrive in thunder or roses. It showed up in quiet things. the way she traced the waves on the bracelet during meetings, the way he started humming her favorite melody when walking past her workspace, the way they spoke without speaking when someone cried in the gallery. They didn't rush love, they grew into it. Some people fall, others rise. Ethan and Lena, rooted, deep, quiet roots, nourished by pain, honesty, and shared purpose. The bracelet remained on her wrist, day and night, not as a symbol of ownership, but as a reminder that once she walked into the wrong office with trembling hands and a forgotten dream. And somehow the man on the other side of the desk saw her, not for what she cleaned, but for what she carried. Now together they carried it forward, not in silence, but in understanding, not in urgency, but in presence. And that was love. The gallery lights dimmed to a gentle glow as the doors of Dream Traces opened for its most anticipated night yet. Titled, What We Dream But Cannot Speak, Lena's final exhibition wasn't promoted with flashy posters or celebrity endorsements. Word had spread quietly, through hearts moved, stories shared, and whispers passed from one soul to another. And yet the line wrapped around the block. Inside, the space had transformed into a living tapestry of silent truths. Each room was curated not just with art, but with meaning. A crayon drawing by a boy who'd lost his mother in a house fire, a stitched tapestry from a woman who had escaped domestic violence, a clay sculpture from a refugee teenager who didn't yet speak English, but knew how to mold longing into shape. The crowd moved slowly, reverently through the exhibit, and at the center of it all, bathed in soft white light, hung Lena's final piece. It stopped people in their tracks, a towering canvas of a woman shielding her child beneath a storm. Her arms wrapped protectively around him, her coat billowing, her body blocking the wind and rain as lightning forked in the distance. The child's face buried in her chest, hands clenched into the fabric. But the most powerful detail, the mother's back wasn't hunched in weakness, it was upright in quiet strength. She wasn't enduring the storm, she was defying it. Behind them again was that shimmering mirror, this time not reflecting star, but showing dozens of other mothers, fathers, strangers, all lined behind them like echoes, standing in the storm too. No one spoke. Some wept. Others simply stared, fists clenched or lips trembling. Because it wasn't just a painting, it was recognition. It was grief, love, and hope, all held on one frame. At the back of the room, Lena stood in a simple black dress, her sketchbook in one hand. The silver bracelet Ethan had given her glinting softly beneath the lights. Reporters finally approached her. Cameras clicked. Microphones reached out like hands begging for something profound. But Lena didn't perform. She didn't prepare a speech. She looked toward Ethan, standing quietly nearby, hands folded, watching her not with pride, but with knowing. He didn't speak, but his eyes said it all. He had seen her, from the beginning, even when no one else did. And when the press asked, "What do you want the world to know?" She paused, then smiled gently, voice steady. "I'm not an artist because of what I draw. I'm an artist because someone saw in my dreams something worth loving." Silence swept the room again, because in that moment, they didn't just see Lena as an artist. They saw her as a mirror, reflecting their own lost parts, forgotten feelings, and quiet longings. And Ethan? He didn't step forward or take her hand. He simply remained at her side, present, constant, seen, because some stories don't end with applause or headlines. They end with truth, shared, quietly, boldly. And Dream Traces had become more than an art center. It had become a place where invisible people realized they always existed. They only needed someone to believe it. And for the first time, the city, no, the world paid attention. Not out of pity, but out of awe. In today's fast-paced world, where titles define worth and silence often means invisibility, Dream Traces reminds us of something essential. That behind every quiet face may be a story waiting to be seen. Lena wasn't rich. She wasn't powerful. She didn't walk into Ethan's world with influence, only a sketchbook and dreams. And yet her honesty, her pain, and her truth healed something in a man who had everything except peace. Perhaps the real message isn't about art or romance, but about how we treat the unseen in our everyday lives. Do we overlook the janitor who cleans the lobby? Do we dismiss the elderly woman in line with her coupons? Do we ignore the teenager drawing alone in the back of the classroom? What if we pause long enough to ask, what do they carry? What have they survived? Love, healing, and understanding often don't arrive in loud moments. They come in the quiet, in being present, in truly seeing someone without needing to fix them. So let us ask you, have you ever felt unseen but longed to be known? Have you ever dismissed someone only to realize later they held more depth than you imagined? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to know how this story touched your heart or made you reflect on someone in your own life. If this story moved you, please give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications for more soul-stirring tales like this one. Because sometimes the smallest stories hold the deepest truths, and you never know. The next person you overlook might be the one who saves your soul. Thank you for watching.